Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome to the Roaring Reactions with your host, Justin Lacey, and myself, Tim Lyons. We're going to go over the recaps of the Detroit Lions versus the Cincinnati Bengals game. We kind of been slacking a little bit. I know it's been kind of we've been trying to get on, but something happens. Brandon was out of town, and I know Justin's just getting over being being sick, and I had a 21-year-old daughter that just turned 21, so I was kind of missing out there. So, but here we are, me and Justin. We're gonna kind of just go over the recap. I know, like Justin and I were just talking backstage. It's just been hard to come up with content because everything that's going on with the Cincinnati Bengals. Everybody knows. I know everybody's bitching and crying and complaining, and it's just to that point to where right now for me, I'm just enjoying football. Hey, Mary Edwards, thank you for showing up. But here we go. I'm going to do the intro, and then we'll be right back and start off with some Bengals news. Welcome back, everybody. Hey, here we are, Justin and I. Gonna put out some content. Figure we'd talk some football. I know we've been, like I said, been kind of quiet. But Justin, how you doing, buddy? It's Tuesday. It's another Bengals loss. How you feeling? How's everything going on your side?
Yeah, well, for our live viewers that's actually going to be watching us or even watch us later on YouTube, I hold in my hand a can of beer. Now, this is a Michelob Ultra light beer because I can't really do the IPAs like a lot of our everyday drinkers are probably or something like that. But it's that kind of season, man, that has turned into the Bengals ever since Joe Burrow went down, and we kind of like already knew this. They're just not a team that is playing inspiring football whatsoever for the first few weeks, and we're going to talk about it, they look more like an XFL team or a semi-pro team. It is very frustrating, very real frustrating to watch the team. And obviously we'll get into it. We'll talk about the Joe Flacco trade that happened earlier this afternoon and what are our expectations on that. But overall, man, I'm just gone on the expectations of championship aspirations for this team because we know without Joe Burrow, this team has proven that they do not belong anywhere close to those windows. So
Amen.
I've just kind of been just chilling by the wayside, really. And I mean, it's not really something popular. I mean, it's really popular around the fan base that they want to talk and complain about everything.
Mm-hmm.
They have the right to do that.
Yeah.
Everybody's yelling at the front office. Everybody's yelling at the coaching staff. Fire Zach Taylor, and you're going to actually see me argue against Zach Taylor too, for the most part. But bottom line is, just to kind of sum it all up, I just think that the Bengals are where they are because they're just lackluster football play. They're just not inspiring right now as a team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel that, after Joe went down and we still pulled off that win against the Jaguars. It's just been kind of like I've been in that phase of, well, low expectations for me. I'm just going to enjoy the football season. I got a fantasy football team that
Mhm.
I manage, so I'm doing pretty good there. I think I'm 4-1 right now. Yeah, I think I'm 4-1 right now, so I'm doing pretty good. I had to put Joe on the IR. Probably end up cutting him eventually. Picked up Bo Nix, but anyways, uh, it's just been watching football and just trying to get the enjoyment out of the season for me. Um,
Yeah.
but here we go. Let's talk about it. Bengals trade for Flacco and a 6th rounder for a 5th rounder to the Browns. So Justin, we got this 40-year-old Joe Flacco. He's like Thanos right now, collecting the jewels or the stones from the
The
AFC.
Infinity
Yeah,
Stones from the
the
AFC
Infinity
North.
Stones from the AFC North right now. He's got
Yeah.
the You know, of course, he played for the Baltimore Ravens and won a Super Bowl, was Super Bowl MVP there. Uh, Went to the Browns. You know, he's played a couple seasons for the Browns here and there a little bit, and then now he's a Bengal. Well, how you feeling, bro? Like, how's it feel?
Well, they had to do something, and we know that the answer was not keep trotting out Jake Browning out there. Jake Browning was just beyond awful, beyond no repair. And we the Bengals, I think, understood that they made a mistake leaning on to the hopes of what he was 2 years ago when he went 4-3 as a starter. But if you watch the film closely, he wasn't even really all that good then. I think that you can really point to one real game, and that was Monday night on the road at Jacksonville. People know that I'm talking about. That was the game that Jake Browning really showed his I'm out of body mirage experience. If you really look at the overall body of work, even during that year, he was just not good at all. I just think that
Right,
he had a more competent team around him. The defense was still kind of shaky on a threshold level, starting to become bad. You still had much of a running game because Joe Mixon was still there. Chase Brown was showing flashes early on. He did the screen passes to him. They were a great screen team during that time where they unlocked that virtue part of the offense with Jake Browning. But that wasn't because of Jake Browning. That was the offensive weaponry around him. Yes, they also going to mention the Minnesota Vikings game from that season, but that was more of a T. Higgins game. You know, when T. Higgins is basically just took over as wide receiver one because Jamar also got hurt that game. But bottom line is Jake Brown, he's just been pedestrian, below average to pedestrian even that year. We liked propping up his almost wins because I believe that year he had against the Kansas City Chiefs. He didn't win that game. I
right,
think that as the game went on, the Chiefs, who also had a down year that year too, they recognized that okay, we can't let this thing slip through our fingers, and they just bolted their necks and then kind of blitzed him, and he made mistakes. And he was just bad. He's just bad. You saw it early on in preseason football. Was like, okay, we really need to get somebody here. And the Bengals should have made a move then. We've kind of said this a little bit, but then now they're making a move. I feel what feels like to me out of desperation because Zach Taylor, you can't keep on hitching your wagon to a quarterback that's just playing god awful football. Jake Browning, like I said, he's been practically the worst quarterback in the league. And some of the tape that he's put out there has been literally the worst that you've seen in like 4 years. Now, Joe Flacco is a guy that just raises the floor for you a little bit in that room, but it doesn't move the needle for me personally. He has his own problems taking care of the football too. But I'd rather have somebody with experience, even though you're going to turn the ball over, and somebody that can actually physically still make the throws on the football field to get it to your receivers and Jamar T. Higgins, or even your tight ends for that matter. Joe Flacco has proven that he can still do that.
right,
Even though with the Browns, he's turned the ball over quite a bit. Two interceptions against the Bengals, but those are kind of more ricochet and deflections. Let's just be honest here.
right.
I just sign me up for it. Okay. I will do it. It's something that just fixes the problem for now. But there's so much more problems on this team that we already can highlight and we're going
Mhm.
to go into. But on the surface, I'm okay with it. I'm fine with it. Screw it. You needed to do something. And here we go.
Yeah.
Let's just get Flacco out there, get him ready. If he suits up Sunday against the Packers, well, guess what? That's a team that he beat 2 weeks ago with the Cleveland Browns. Let's try it again this Sunday at Lambeau Field.
Yeah, you know, it's funny is that we went from week 1, the Bengals versus the Browns and Joe Flacco, and then here we are week you know, after week 5, or is this week? No, this is week 5. Yeah, no, this will be week 6. I'm sorry, week 6. Joe Flacco's our starter, or is our quarterback, is one of our quarterbacks. I won't say he's our starter, but he's our quarterback. One of our quarterbacks. When I'm gonna be honest with you guys, when I first seen the push that came up through this morning, I was like, "What the fudge?" I was like, "What the hell's going on here?" But then I settled down. Tim, that logical brain kind of clicked in because it was still foggy in the morning for me. I was still wiping the sleep from my eyes, and I was like, "You know what? Joe Flacco's not a bad idea." I would have liked it if this would have happened a little bit earlier in the season, so Joe could already had the playbook down and our offense and everything down. So when when Joe Burrow went down and Jake shit the bed like he did, um, Joe Flacco would be ready. But as we know, Cincinnati or the Cleveland Browns, excuse me, wanted to keep 5 quarterbacks on the roster. Joe Flacco was their starter, so it is what it is. But now after looking at all this stuff over the past couple out, the last hours, since this push came through, I was like, you know what, Joe Flacco, he has a high quarterback IQ. He's got a good presence in the pocket. Yeah, he's 40 years old and he's not going to be able to take off like he used to back in the day. But Joe Flacco, he's not a bad quarterback. I think, and I might be wrong. You guys might think I'm crazy, but I think Joe Flacco is a better quarterback than Jake Browning is. That's just how I see it.
Nobody thinks that that's wrong. Okay. If there are
Okay.
people in this fan base that thinks that Joe Flacco, even at 40 years old, watched up past his prime, is worse than Jake Browning, those fans need to be tested for head trauma or something because they
Right.
cannot convince me for the last 3 weeks of what we saw that anybody hasn't been better. Now, bottom line is, and also, I'll just say this because I'm aiming at Zach Taylor here next when it's coming to this topic. Who was the answer in that quarterback room? None of them. Okay,
Right.
it's not Mike White. No matter how much you want to, people want to bring up 2021 against the Bengals when he checked down, dinked and dunked his way to 400 yards against us. That one out of body experience game. Mike White over the years has proven that he does not belong in the league, which is why the Bengals cut him to make way for
Mm-hmm.
somebody like Joe Flacco. Sean Clifford, no, thank you. Okay. Brett Rippon, who they cut because they signed Flacco and they need to put him into the active roster. There was no answers on this team currently at quarterback. And Jake Browning has proven that he is not even a backup quarterback anymore at this point. He's probably
Right.
at best a third stringer, even if that. So,
Yeah.
but if you're Zach Taylor, like I said, I brought up the word desperation at this point because at this point, if you're Zach Taylor, you and Duke Tobin should be getting together and thinking like, dude, this may be it for me, man. This may be it. I'm already writing off that if the Bengals don't turn this thing around and make the playoffs and whatnot and start doing their due diligence, this will probably be Jack Taylor's last year as a head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals. Majority of the fan base are already on the Vire Jack Taylor train. I'm already
Right.
there with him. This
Right.
team is not well coached. They're not well prepared. They are making ill-advised mistakes at ill inopportunity times. But at the end of the day, this AFC is very, very, very weak. The division alone stinks. Okay. Right now, Pittsburgh's leading the division at 3-1. They got Cleveland Browns this upcoming weekend. Hell, they might even be 4-1. But are you really sold on the Pittsburgh Steelers long term? No. This is the same
No.
song and dance we've seen from them every single year. Start off a little bit fast, taper down the stretch, and end up just in pure epiphany slow later. That's been the Mike Tomlin identity for this Pittsburgh team. Baltimore has been ravaged with injuries. They're 1-4. They potentially
Right.
might be 1-5. The Cleveland Browns, again, potentially might be 1-5. If you're the Cincinnati Bengals, you're looking at this like, dude, no matter how bad of football we have played, uninspiring football, you're still kind of in this thing. And really, it's not going to be the end all be all and fix all the problems. But really, the main solution that you got to get right for the now is quarterback until Joe
Mm-hmm.
Burrow gets back. If that gets to the point. That's what you just needed to do. I preferably would have liked to have Jameis Winston, like a lot of fans have echoed out there. I'm not a fan of the Russ Wilson experiment. I think that, both guys are washed up anyway. So it's either Russ or Joe Flacco. But if you're just trying to get somebody that understands the AFC North in his current state, Flacco's been there. He's done it. He's came from your division.
Right.
B, he has enough veteran experience to where he can pick up the offense very quickly on the fly. Mind you, 2 years ago, when he actually got signed off the couch from the Cleveland Browns, he wasn't already studying playbook stuff. He got
Right.
signed mid-season off the couch, and he already won comeback player and let him to go to a playoff appearance.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not expecting that version of Joe Flacco to come in and play that good on Sunday, but I am expecting him to play better than what Jake Browning has. And Zach Taylor, you need somebody like that to kind of help you right the ship because this offense has been bad. Zach
Mm-hmm.
Taylor is on the critical hot seat right now, and he needs this to work out for his own head coaching future's sake. So I'll say that for now.
Yeah, well, it's the Cincinnati Bengals. Look how long we put up with Marvin Lewis. It took it literally took season ticket holders to just say screw it, we're done and walk out the stadium for them to finally fire Marvin Lewis. It took years. Am I hoping that this is not a repeat? Yes, I am hoping that it's not a repeat. And if we end up with a losing season, which is looking towards that way, um, do they keep Zach or do they fire him? I don't know. I honestly don't know what Mike Brown and Katie Blackburn and them what they're going to do. I don't have a clue what the hell they're doing anymore. Because honestly, after this trade with the Cleveland Browns today, that threw me off. To be honest with you, like I
Mhm.
honestly did not think that the Cincinnati Bengals were going to make any any trades or anything like we do every season. We don't do nothing. We just, poke the stick and hope it does something. But we actually made a trade. I think it was out of desperation. I just, I don't I'm not sold on the idea that we got Flacco. Like I said, he's a veteran. He's got good quarterback IQ. He's got his presence in the pocket. He's been around for a long time. I know he's 40 years old. I'm not going to give the old guy any slack. I'm old. He's a better quarterback than me. So, he's a professional. And I think it's something that I guess we'll just wait and see. But my expectations are still going to be low no matter what. Zach Taylor really needs to, honestly, he needs to give over the offensive playbook and let pitcher call the offense. He really does. I know they toyed around with it before Brian Callahan left, and they were talking about letting him do the play calling, but it hasn't happened, and honestly, I don't see it happening. But anyways, that's it. I'm
Not
not like I said, I'm not pissed off that Joe Flacco's here, but at least the Bengals did something to bring another quarterback in and address the situation because for us to go, you know, shoot, what, 11 more weeks or however many more weeks, 12 more weeks,
it just couldn't happen. It
it
could not
it
happen.
would have been a disaster. It would have been a
Yeah.
disaster, and Zach would have got fired. They would have fired. He would have been guaranteed to be fired if Jake Browning was to continue on the path that he's on. But let's get into another subject. But you know what? Before we do that, I'm going to take a quick commercial break before we get into this next subject. And I'm sorry, guys, that I'm not addressing everybody in the chat. I'm driving this ship now, so it's kind of hard for me to do everything. I'm an old man, so just. But I'm going to take a quick commercial break for everybody in the podcast world. You guys will hear commercials, sponsors, and everything. YouTube, you guys will get a little silence, and then we'll be right back. And then we will go on to our next subject. Be right back. All right, welcome back to the Roaring Reactions with your Running Through the Jungle crew, Justin and I. Tim Lyons, that is. For some of you that are listening, sorry, I got to remember that not everybody can see what I'm doing. So, but we want to get into the Cincinnati Bengals for the last 3 weeks just losing games, awful games. Got our asses kicked by the Vikings. Awful game against the Broncos. Awful game against the Detroit Lions. And I know Justin wants to, not live in the past, but I'm going to bring some stuff up. So, the Minnesota Vikings game, 5 turnovers, 3 fumbles, 2 interceptions. Best player on that field, Rodgers. What was the name? Isaiah Rodgers. That dude was playing out of his damn mind. He was just playing out of his damn mind. Cincinnati Bengals couldn't hold on to the football. Jake Browning throws 2 interceptions. It was just awful. 12 first downs, I believe, that we had that game. And it just, the wheels fell off the bus. And it just kept going on. And then we had the Broncos game. Broncos game was just awful again. 9 first downs, 3 interceptions by Jake Brown. I think there was. I think there was 3 interceptions. it just kept going on and on. But then last weekend or this past Sunday, we played against the Detroit Lions. It was still awful. Justin, like I said, I know you didn't want to go into the past, but I wanted to kind of bring up some stuff. We've only scored, I think we were outscored 100 and something to, like 16 points, whatever the hell it was. Those last 3 games just got awful. So Justin, how are you feeling after that Sunday afternoon loss against the Detroit Lions and the shit show, the 2 shit shows before that? What is your opinion on what's going on, or just how you feel about these games?
Well, I'll just kind of start by saying this. It's not that I don't want to discuss about the past or anything like that, because it's not the past. It's what the Bengals team is now. Okay.
Right, right.
It's just because we're 2 weeks already beyond past, obviously, the Broncos and the Vikings and whatnot. But no, talking about those 2 games is very relevant to what just happened this past Sunday. The only difference is that they kind of scored some garbage time points in the fourth quarter. But make no mistake about it, in the Detroit Lions game, that game was well over by the end of the beginning of the third quarter when Jake Browning threw his third interception. It was
Yeah.
just that awful, uninspiring football. You have Jamar Chase looking like a very average to below average receiver because of the guy who's throwing him the ball. And thank God Jamar Chase made plays after play just to make it a somewhat entertaining and inspiring towards the end of that game. Because
Hmm.
otherwise, it was just going to be very much to the chagrin of what we saw the Prairie 2 games, whereas he just had basically 3 to 5 catches for like just a total of like 20 yards.
Yeah.
That's nothing. Jamar Chase can get 20 yards on one catch alone by
Hmm.
himself off of one drive. It took Jake Browning 3 games to finally get him to look like the receiver but he didn't even do that. Jamar Chase was the one that did all those excellent route running precisions to do that. I will say the overall feeling that I have of this Bengals team is much to what I said before when we introduced the Joe Flacco trade in the prior segment. You're just playing bad football. You look like
Hmm.
a team that you just didn't belong for the most part. Like you can't hang with the big boys or just be in the big leagues in general. With the Minnesota Vikings, that team is not impressive. But I knew that going into that game that the Bengals were already going to have a well below tough matchup because they just don't have their guy that can elevate and ascend the rest of this roster. And that does include, unfortunately, Jamar and T, even though I like their individual matchups against their teams. I just think that the way that the offense was structured, which falls right in the hands of having a guy like Joe Burrow just overcompensate and cover things up, I just didn't like the rest of the matchup for this team. Chris Sims, very good, great, analyst for the NFL, former NFL QB, host of the Unbuttoned podcast on NBC and all that good stuff. He said on this podcast after the Bengals lost to the Denver Broncos, and then again did a review after the week 5 slate of games after we lost to the Detroit Lions.
Hmm.
Joe Burrow is superhuman. The way how he was able to cover up so many holes and flaws in this organization as a whole. When you take him out, outside of him and Jamar and T, we already know, and even Trey to an extent, what value is the rest of this team bringing to the locker room, to the team on the field? What value are the coaches bringing? Because what I continuously see is the Bengals trotting out a bad offensive line out there.
Hmm.
I'm not even going to talk about the front office move because guess what? Majority of the people were happy with the front office move, how they address O line. They brought in the Dalton Reisners of the world. Sure, did we get Tate Rodgers? No, but you got Dylan Fairchild in draft. People were I was just there, but I was told Dylan Fairchild was going to be a great player, and he has lived up to the billing for a certain extent, but it just hasn't worked out. I was told that Al Golden was going to bring discipline to this defense. We were told all of these things, but it just hasn't worked out. That he was going to play the young guys. Nobody's playing great football. I was told, and I even bought into it a little bit myself, that a guy like Cam Taylor Britt was going to bounce back and that we were buying all that stock. Cam Taylor Britt looks like he needs to be off this team after 3 to 5 weeks of the season because all I keep hearing is him talking about, oh, I'm done playing bad football. Well, you're still doing it. What are you going to do now? At this
Right.
point, dog, 5 snaps into the freaking last game, you're not even seeing the field no more because you're just not good anymore. Logan Wilson, I was told that he was the blue chip guy that Al Golden was going to center to be able to have communicate throughout the rest and echo the rest of the defense. He looks old and he looks slow. Yes, the drop off is that quick for a guy. And we thought he was going to do a resurgence after week 1, but not anymore. He looks like a guy that is in the Jermaine Pratt conversation who just got cut from the Raiders
Oh,
just yesterday.
you're gonna do him dirty like that?
I'm doing them all dirty like that because they played
Damn.
football so bad enough to the point where it's warranted. This is how I feel because of the 3 straight losses that have piled up. No one's beside maybe Jamar Chase and Trey Hendrickson right now, and I'm not even going to bring T in this conversation of blame right now. Nobody is playing inspiring football on the field. The coaches, namely, I'm aiming at Zach Taylor because at this point, I'm done blaming position coaching. You brought up Marvin Lewis a little bit in the previous segment briefly there, but Zach Taylor is not afforded that luxury, similar to what Marvin Lewis went through his 16 years. The back end of Marvin Lewis years were the main culprit. Like, okay, can't continue. This version of what we're seeing right now from Zach Taylor, dude, we know you have a Ferrari at quarterback and as receiver. You got blue chip talented guys here in certain particular roles in the most important critical pieces of this team. And you can't even play inspiring offense, to say the
Right,
least. Your offense
right.
doesn't even look good, even with Joe. He has to just make it look so much better than what it is. People keep on putting up 2024 Joe Burrow numbers like, oh my gosh, this offense is going to be wicked crazy going into next year. They had a potential to be the best offense. But if you look at their offense from last year and look at the Lions offense from last year into this year, you'll see that this is two totally different systems. Joe
Yeah.
Burrow's obviously the better quarterback between him and Goff, even though I like Jared Goff too. But Jared Goff helps run a better offensive system because it's catered to more things to elevate the personnel around Jared Goff plus Jared Goff. Joe Burrow has to carry the whole thing on his shoulders for it to look like a competent offense. They can't run the ball. They can't even get no semblance of a running game. We haven't even seen Taj Brooks in action unless it is such a far blowout to the point and we'll just put him in here for some quick mop-up duty because the rest of the guys, it's time to pack it in. You know what I mean? That's not good. That's not giving you no true counterproductive snaps. It's just bad football, man, all the way around. I know I've
Yeah.
gone a little bit long-winded there, but you get my point. The whole audience, you listen to me, you guys get where I'm coming from. That's how I overall feel after these 3 straight losses and potentially 4 straight losses too, because I'm sorry, but I'm just not going to give them a chance against the Green Bay Packers on the road.
Yeah, yeah, I'm right there with you, man. I'm tired of, and my blame is not quite as much as it is on your side. My blame is Zach Taylor in the offense.
Mhm.
I understand that Jamar Chase is out there doing what he's trying to do. T. Higgins, Chase Brown working his butt off, just trying to get a couple of yards in that offensive line. Zach Taylor's play calling in that offensive line is just horrendous. It really is. That offensive line is not the best. Even though I think last week they only allowed 2 sacks. Week before I think was 3. There should have been more sacks than that on Sunday versus the Lions, but they got
I
called
agree.
back for penalties. But
Right.
but 2 of them were counted. But it's just like this offense is so stale that we can't even get Chase Brown going. Chase Brown can't get going at all. Jamar Chase has got to be Superman out there, to get 110 yards,
Seriously.
two touchdowns and 3 tackles. He had 3 tackles on Sunday, all on those 3
Led the
picks.
lead. Led the
Yeah,
team.
yeah, and that's just sad. It's bad news. It's bad. It's like we have the bad news Bengals here, and not the bad news Bears, but the bad news Bengals here.
Yeah.
And I love my team, and I'm going to stick up for the defense a little bit. I know you beat them down pretty good. You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
I'll explain in a
But
minute, but I want you to
yeah,
continue.
yeah. But when you have a quarterback throwing 3 interceptions, giving them the ball, you know, right outside the red zone and shit, what do you expect's going to happen?
Mhm.
When you have an offense on the field that's only getting 12 first downs or 9 first downs against the Broncos, or doing these 3 and outs and not putting up any points on the board, what's going to happen? Defense is
Mhm.
going to get tired. I don't care.
Yeah.
And there were some questionable calls that that Al Golden and I'm not sticking up for Al Golden because I'm a Notre Dame fan. No, I truly believe in Al Golden, and I like what he's doing with the defense, believe it or not. Besides putting Joseph Osai, on a on a tight end, that kind of crap's got to go. That's got to stop. That's got to stop. There shouldn't be no reason you should be putting a defensive end back in coverage to cover a tight end, or doing a little a zone coverage out there. You shouldn't do it. There's no. That's a linebacker's job. What the hell is he doing with the linebackers? That's like my biggest question. And I'm right there with you when it comes to Logan Wilson. Logan Wilson has been stale. I'm not going to compare him to Jermaine Pratt quite yet, but he's getting there. He's stepping there. We're seeing some good play out of Joseph Asai. Chris Murphy Jr. or Chris. What's his
Miles
name?
Murphy.
Is it Chris Jenkins? Excuse me. I don't know why I'm getting. Yeah, Chris Jenkins is playing good football. Slayton's playing good football. It just, I don't know, man. This offense can wear a defense down quickly. And, as we saw against the Vikings, 3 turnovers, 2 interceptions, 3 fumbles. Those guys put up so many points. That defense on the Minnesota side was putting up points like mad and making turnovers. And 5 turnovers in the first half of that Vikings and Bengals game. But anyways, I'm not going to put all the blame on the defense. A lot of the blame's on Zach Taylor in this offense, the way this offense is running, how he's running this offense, how Jake Browning is executing. His execution is piss poor. Like, I would rather find, one of our audience members. I told Austin today, I said, you're a better quarterback than Jake Browning is. Like, on Sunday after this Lions game, I was so pissed off. Like, I was like, I'm about to go fly to Cincinnati. I'm gonna go to the store, buy a box of 30-gallon hefty bags, and start packing his shit and tell him to get the hell out. Because this experiment is over. Like, I honestly thought, and I know I might have been a little bit, off the hinges today or this weekend, but I thought Jake Browning would have got cut before Mike White would have, honestly. But if you look at the stats with Mike White, he ain't that good of a quarterback either. Rippon ain't a good quarterback. And then who's that other dude? Clifford or whatever the hell his name is. Clifford the Red Dog. He's another backup quarterback, practice squad guy, whatever the hell he is. There's no good quarterback. Our quarterback room is shit without Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow made Zach Taylor and Brian Callahan's careers. Joe Burrow is the reason why Brian Callahan is the head coach in the Tennessee Titans, and he might be getting his ass fired this season as well because he doesn't have a Joe Burrow over there as a quarterback.
Now, he does have Cam Ward. He does.
Yeah,
Cam Ward looking solid, but he ain't the reason why Cam Ward looks solid though. But I'll say that.
Exactly.
Okay. Let me
you
talk
go
about
ahead.
the defense.
Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let's talk about the defense because I want to be very, very, very clear as I make this statement.
Mm-hmm.
I understand what Al Golden was put in, like the situation that he came into. The Bengals front office really didn't make enough moves. They didn't make hardly any moves, really, for the defensive side of the ball.
Amen.
Al Golden is trotting out there for the most part last year's crew. I also understood that this team on defense, more specifically, was not going to be fixed in one offseason in 1 year. But here's what I did expect. I am going to give Al Golden a little bit of pass on that there. But here's what I did expect. People to stop missing tackles.
Right.
Be very disciplined when it comes to their gaps and their coverages because Al Golden, for much as what everybody told me about his tenure at Notre Dame, ran a lot of man-to-man.
Yep.
I also expected a lot of sticky coverage on some guys. Now, for the most part, this personnel is just simply not good enough. But once again, we're finding ourselves having the same conversation about the defense like we did a little bit last year, even though there is some turnovers maybe here and there. But look at the first few games of the season before we got to the Lions game. This was supposed to be the easy part of the schedule. There was no quarterback that was really somebody that you needed to fear. And if you want to throw Trevor Lawrence into that bucket, I don't remember anybody's talking about fearing Trevor Lawrence as the starting quarterback that you worry about the most, even though I think that team is they're looking pretty serious right now. They just knocked off the Kansas City Chiefs Monday night. But bottom line is, this was the easy part of your schedule, and yet here I am still coming to grips like, gosh, man, they still can't stop the run. Gosh, man, they still missing tackles. They're taking bad angles. I still don't like anything that I'm seeing from the safeties, even though I know that Jordan Battle got a couple of lucky ricochet interceptions off of Trevor Lawrence and Joe Flacco, so to speak. We brought his name up. I'm not seeing Geno Stone making no kind of impact. Cam Taylor-Britt still stinks. I don't really trust DJ Turner on an island by himself. I don't think I'm getting what I thought I was going to get out of return from Josh Newton. Dax Hill is probably the only guy that I can honestly say I can be 100% happy if we keep him moving forward. But that's literally it outside of him or Trey. And this is not including the rookies as far as like Demetrius Knight, Barrett Carter, and let's kind of wait a little bit. But same thing with Shamar Stewart. But there's a lot of veteran presence here that should have taken an extra step. And I'm always to the point like, if we haven't seen it yet at this point, like with the Miles Murphys, even though I know he got a sack, I'm not going to criticize him too much. Same thing with Joseph Asai. But if we haven't seen true impact at this point, I don't think we're ever going to see it. At this point, I just want to see you produce just enough so that way we can find a way to get you on your next team and get some compensation in return at this point, because I can't deal with it anymore. And just because you had a failing grade last year, why are we in an era and in a space where a 68%, a 60%, a D is an accepting passable grade for this defense? No, that's still a bad defense. Okay. Just because they're getting outplayed as far as being bad by this current state of the offense right now. And yes, I agree with you. The offense deserves many parts of the blame for why the defense has underperformed. When the defense basically just broke open and the Lions just kind of kept scoring during the back end, I was like, it ain't the defense fault. They did everything they could. But I also thought that, what if the Lions kept scoring? Like, what if the Lions actually played real serious ball? Because after they got to 21 points, they took their foot off the gas, bro. Like when they got to 28-3 or something, they took their foot all the way off the gas and just kept
Right.
playing disciplined run football. But
Mhm.
then you saw those couple of garbage time touchdowns in the fourth quarter. What did they do? Lock back in, started wheeling and dealing, easy
Right.
score. If you're the defense, you see that there's an opportunity for you to get a stop and get the ball back when they were bowling their necks. Okay, no, we got to be serious. You didn't. So that tells me when you go against real teams with real offenses, you will not be able to keep up. But again, it's not me blaming the defense. It's not putting all the blame on defense. It's just not me giving them a pass just
Right.
for looking somewhat passable. Like I said, in grade school or in let's say in high school, if you get a D in one quarter and a D for the second quarter, you got a D for the semester. Okay, you pass. You pass the class and you get to move on. That's unacceptable, man. Like, I'm not going to give you a pass just because you got a D. All right. This is where this defense is right now for me. They're still not a good unit. Yes, they have taken advantage of some fortunate turnovers, but the turnovers that they are still forced is because of the playmakers. Like, the only turnover that they had was because of Trey Hendrickson, dog. We know
Mhm.
Trey Hendrickson's that dude. If Trey wasn't on the field, bro, who was getting to the quarterback with that strip sack? Nobody. Now, we saw Miles Murphy and Joseph Asai each register a sack, both. But again, it was probably during the time of the game where the competitive part of the football game for the Lions was over. They were just sitting down on the clock, sitting on offense, just we done. We did our job. This was kind of like a scrimmage for next week. Let's just get out healthy. And then the Bengals just happened to kind of put a little bit of sauce to in the fourth quarter, even though we know the game was over. And then they was like, all right, let's not make them feel like that they are in this game. Went right back down the field, scored again, and it was over with. You know what I mean? So I do worry a lot about this defense. And
Yeah.
this is still not a great defense, but I do see areas that they have gotten a little bit better from obviously last year. But I'm tired of comparing teams from year to year on a basis. Look, we in the here and now, bro. My overall blame is Zach Taylor for the overall look of this team. They still are undisciplined. Yes, when we
Yeah.
think of Zach Taylor, we keep pointing at offense, but dog, bro, I don't care. You are the head coach of the entire team. when your team is undisciplined and unfocused, getting pre-snap penalties, offsides penalties, personal foul penalties, stupid things like pass interference penalties and stuff like that when it was not needed. Dude, that's on the head coach. Part of it on the
Yeah.
defense coordinator too. But like I said, this is on the head coach because we're seeing the same thing on offense with the pre-snap penalties, the holding penalties and stuff like we're seeing that all throughout the team. The only thing that you can sort of tip your cap on of, hey, we're at least we're not horrible at this one again like we were last year is Evan McPherson. Like that's
Yeah.
really it. And probably Ryan Recal, but he shanks punts here and there. So,
Right. But people are
but
human, athletes,
yeah,
shit
they
happens,
make
but
mistakes, but I believe in Ryan. I still like Ryan Recal as my punter, but in Evan
I do too.
McPherson, back in the form as kicker. But
Mhm.
that's where I'm at. I'm not giving one side of the ball a pass because the other side of the ball looks worse than them.
Mhm.
I'm grading you because the overall look of this team is still bad. They don't look like a
Yeah.
competitive football team, and the spirit and the magic of Joe Burrow to inject life into this team is what brings this team to life. They have no philosophy, they have no substance, they have no formula if he's not there.
Yeah. Well, that I 100% agree with you. But I don't want to keep everybody too long. Let's hurry up and do this. Offensive and defensive game balls. Do you have any game balls to hand out to anybody against
All
the
right.
Detroit Lions?
On the offense side, I'm going with Jamar. He's the only reason why this team
Me
was fun
too.
to watch, and he's the only
Yep.
one that deserves it. And
Yep.
for defense, it's Trey Henderson because he was the one guy that got the one turnover. So
Mhm.
while sure you can throw some honorable mentions in there for other guys on defense per se, I'm not giving it to nobody else because Trey was the one guy that shows up, is constantly the only one that shows up.
Mhm.
And I just hope that somebody just gets on his level at some point soon.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I take Jamar Chase, give him my offensive game ball, 110 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 tackles. Definitely
Three
my offensive
tackles.
game balls.
Three
Defensive
tackles,
wise,
man.
defensive wise, I'm gonna actually go with Chris Jenkins. One and a
Okay.
half sacks. I know Trey Hendrickson. He got the forced fumble. But I'm gonna give it to Chris Jenkins, the mutant. He's my defensive game ball for his 1.5 sacks. Nice to see him. It's funny is our defensive line was such a worry this season, and I was looking up PFF rankings and stuff like that. From what I'm seeing, is Bengals are in the top 10 in the NFL for defensive line, which is kind of like what?
Mhm.
So, but I'm going to give it, like I said, Chris Jenkins is my offensive or my defensive game ball,
Yeah.
and then that pretty much wraps everything up. Justin, final thoughts? Do you have anything that you want to say, or you want to save them for tomorrow's show? I don't know. What you got anything to say?
Yeah, you know what? Obviously, it's not a good time right now to be a Bengals fan. But I will say this,
Amen.
because obviously a good chunk of the conversation topic on the actual Run Through the Jungle episode for tomorrow's show, we'll be having a lot of discussion about our thoughts about the Green Bay Packers and stuff. But for the most part, man, my final thoughts is look, just give this Flacco thing a chance for the time being. We literally have nothing else to lose. We've been watching bad football. It can't get any worse than that.
Right.
So, with that being said, give it a shot. Was he my first choice? No. Was it a move that I saw coming? No. I didn't expect him to make an in division trade at that. Usually
Mm-hmm.
there's always an unwritten rule when it comes to NFL teams. But look, the Bengals like, dude, we don't care. At this point, we need to figure out something. Um, just give it a shot, and because I'm giving it a shot, I don't care what the stigma is behind it. You needed something. You still got a chance to compete, and I think that you got to figure out a way to burn both candles of the end, both ends of the candle until its time runs out. Until you realize that, all right, man, this is not going to. We just got to mail it in for the year. We ain't there yet.
Yeah, I agree. Justin, thank you for so much for joining me today. I know you guys are all busy schedules and dealing with colds and allergies and all that stuff. So, but I appreciate you joining me. Trying to keep this thing going. We will be back tomorrow at 5:05 Pacific Standard Time, 8:05 Eastern Time. Central Time, I think it's like 6:05 or something. I forget what the hell time it is in Central Time. But
Seven,
anyway,
seven, seven Central
seven,
Time, 6 Mountain,
seven.
and all that. Yeah, the times don't
Yeah.
suck.
So we will be back. Justin and I will be back tomorrow. Maybe we'll have Brandon come in here. We always miss our boy Brandon. But we will be back tomorrow night on the Running Through the Jungle show. We will go over the matchup versus the Green Bay Packers, and We will see you guys tomorrow around, like I said, 5:05, 8:05. Thank you guys for coming. Hey, don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on your alert bell, share with your friends, share with your neighbor, share with the guy down the street next to the neighbor's cousin's house, whatever the hell it is, but make sure you share it. We appreciate you guys. Have a great night. Hoo day.